There are stories that entertain you, and then there are stories that stay inside you. This chapter of the Bhundu Boys is not really about the music. It's now about what happens when fame comes and then leaves. When the cheering stops, when the silence becomes louder than the crowd. Because the Bhundu Boys were not just a band. To me, they were a soundtrack of a new Zimbabwe. But their ending was a funeral. And there is something many people misunderstand. These men did not come to Britain dreaming of living in the UK forever. They didn't come with that immigration mentality of, I am here to settle. No. They came here as workers. They came as soldiers. They came like men who said, let's go, make money, build something, and return home. They wanted to go back home to Zimbabwe with something solid: land, cattle, homes, security for their families. Because in their minds, London wasn't home. It was a contract. London was a season. London was just a place to work. But then the problem is, the more successful they become, the more the system tightened around them. They were told to stay longer, to tour again, sign this, sign that, buy a house in the UK, and slowly, without realizing, they stopped being visitors and became prisoners of the industry. Because once your visas are controlled, once your money is controlled, once your bookings are controlled, you don't decide when to go home. Someone else decides for you. In the early years after independence, the Bhundu Boys were celebrated everywhere. They were even honored by our president Robert Mugabe himself. Back then, Mugabe was still praised internationally. Even the British politicians loved him. Zimbabwe was young, the future looked bright, and the Bhundu Boys were the present hope. They were freedom with guitars. They were independence in harmony. They were something that had changed. The Bhundu Boys began playing benefit shows to raise awareness for AIDS. They were not trying to be political, ladies and gentlemen. They were trying to save life. But at that time, AIDS was treated like a shame, like a secret, and that angered ZANU-PF. But because it was true. And that's the first lesson. Sometimes you don't get pushed for lying, you get pushed for telling the truth. Rise Kagona did what many Africans, you and I, dream of. After touring the world, after the limousines, after the fame, he wanted to invest back home. He invested his savings into a farm outside Harare. He was a future for his children. A man trying to make sure his success meant something. But Rise arrived at the farm. He didn't find peace. He found a group of youths waiting for him. They called themselves comrades. They didn't ask him about Wembley. They asked him one thing: show us your ZANU-PF card. Rise says he didn't have one. He showed them the deeds. They didn't care. They said, in his words, show us your ZANU-PF card or you have 5 minutes to get out before we unalive you. And Rise Kagona said, I decided land was not worth dying for. Imagine that. A man who once made the world dance, forced to return from his own land because of a political card. I'll leave that story for now. Rise Kagona said they toured America. They met Ray Charles. They even played in Central Park. They were driven everywhere in limousines like kings. But one day in New York, the limousine arrived and Biggie refused to get in. Rise asked him why. Why, Biggie? Biggie said, it didn't feel right. He said they were living too rich while their brothers and sisters were suffering back home in Zimbabwe. Biggie wasn't refusing luxury, understand me. because it was not because he was arrogant. He refused it because he still had guilt. He still had conscience. He was famous, but he was still human. Then the band bought a large house in Kensal Green in London. To the world outside, it looked like success. The Zimbabwe band owning a property in England. That looked like victory. But Rise later on said he never wanted that house. He said no one of us wanted a house. No one of us had even have a house back home. I would have preferred to buy a home in Africa. And that house became the beginning of confusion. Because once you tie brotherhood to a mortgage, you tie your friendship to paperwork. And paperwork is colder than any winter. And slowly, the band stopped being brothers. They became business partners who no longer trusted each other. As the Bhundu Boys grew bigger, Biggie Tembo started changing. Their manager said Biggie became unpredictable. Biggie began believing that he was bigger than the group. There were accusations, there were arguments, there was ego. But here's what people forget. Sometimes when a man becomes difficult, it's not because he is evil. It's because he is breaking inside. I'm not saying this to defend Biggie. One side said Biggie walked out. The other side says he was fired. But either way, the result was the same. Biggie was rejected. And that rejection hit him like a bullet. And DK Show said Biggie would come to his house and he would begin to cry, crying for no reason, just crying. Then he would talk about how much he missed the band and how he has lost it. Rise Kagona said Biggie became obsessed with contacting his ancestors. He would lock himself in a room. He would take snuff, bute, and he would pray to his ancestors. And he would make some strange noises. He was calling the spirits. Rise confirmed in a news article that those rituals took Biggie somewhere else, to a bad place, and he ended up mad. Biggie even went on Zimbabwean television and confessed demons possessed him, not because he wanted attention, but he was a man crying for help. So, the band was registered as a UK company, the Bhundu Boys Limited. But later, company house records showed something disturbing. No annual accounts were submitted, no transparency. Then the company was forced into liquidation in 1990 and officially dissolved in 1995. And that way the fog begins, because then there is no accounts. Truth becomes a rumor. And when the truth becomes a rumor, everyone escapes responsibility. When asked what happened to the London house, the manager said it was mortgaged. He later bought it from the band because the band owed him money. He said it was bought for 93,000 in 1987 and sold for 98,000 in 1993. And the math is not mathing. This is not good. But in Rise Kagona's version, this is the one that breaks your heart. He said the house was sold. He didn't get anything. He didn't get profit. He didn't get security. He said the only money he got was the selling of his bed linen, which was in the house. It was separate to a charity shop. And he got £5. £5 from Wembley Stadium to £5. That's not just misfortune. That's humiliation. And while this was happening, Biggie's widow, Radizai, is in Bari cleaning toilets. And the world is still enjoying the Bhundu Boys music. Their old albums are reissued They are sold in UK, they are sold in US, Japan, and there Ratidzai receives nothing. No royalties, no check, nothing. So the world is still dancing while the widow is still struggling to buy even paraffin to heat. And that's when you realize this wasn't just a sad ending, it was abandonment. So when you listen to the Bhundu Boys, don't just hear the guitars, hear the pain behind the joy, hear the cost behind the rhythm, hear the silence behind the applause. Because the story teaches us something brutal. Fame is not enough, and the music alone cannot protect you. The music cannot protect you from systems that don't value human beings. They came to the UK to work, to make money and go back. Somewhere along the way, the road turned, and instead of returning back with wealth, with funerals, with deaths, with broken families. If this story has moved you, I would appreciate. Give it a like. There is. Until next time, it's bye for now.